The gunshot echoed through the Montana wilderness as Mabel Evans ducked behind a fallen tree, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She'd been running for 3 days now away from a past that seemed determined to claim her future. The year was 1878, and the Western Territories offered both freedom and danger in equal measure for a woman alone. Snow had begun to fall as dusk approached, the temperature dropping rapidly across the rugged landscape. Mabel's thin coat, once suitable for spring in scent. Louis now failed miserably against Montana's early winter. Her small satchel contained little more than a change of clothes, the last of her food, and $47 sewn into the lining, all that remained of her previous life. She stumbled through the deepening snow, disoriented as the white flakes swirled around her. The creek appeared suddenly, its waters dark and rushing between ice-crusted banks. Mabel fell to her knees beside it, cupping her trembling hands to drink the frigid water. Her reflection showed a woman she barely recognized, face smudged with dirt, once tidy brown hair now wild around her shoulders, blue eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. "I can't stop," she whispered to herself, though her body begged for rest. They might still be following. But as she tried to stand, her legs betrayed her. The combination of exhaustion, cold, and hunger overwhelmed her system. Mabel collapsed beside the creek, curling into herself as violent shivers racked her body. The snow continued to fall, beginning to cover her like a deadly blanket as consciousness slipped away. She didn't hear the approach of hooves, didn't notice the tall figure dismounting nearby. "Hello there. Madam, can you hear me?" The voice seemed to come from a great distance. Rough hands gently turned her over, and Mabel's eyes fluttered open to meet a concerned gaze beneath the brim of a weather-worn hat. "You're half frozen," the stranger said, his voice deep and steady. "You'll warm beside my fire tonight." Without waiting for a response, he lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing, carrying her to where his horse waited patiently. Through the haze of near hypothermia, Mabel registered only the sudden warmth of his body against hers, and the scent of leather, smoke, and pine. "I'm Wade Anderson," he said, as he placed her carefully atop his horse before mounting behind her. "And I reckon you picked about the worst night possible to be out in these parts." The journey passed in a blur for Mabel. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of being held upright by strong arms and the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them. When they finally stopped, she saw the outline of a small cabin nestled among tall pines, smoke curling from its chimney. Wade carried her inside, placing her in a chair near the blazing hearth. The cabin was simple but solid, one room with a bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, and shelves stocked with supplies. A coffee pot bubbled on the small iron stove. "Don't try to get warm too fast," Wade advised, removing her wet boots and wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Slow is better." Mabel watched through half-closed eyes as he moved efficiently around the cabin, pouring coffee and adding something from a bottle before bringing it to her. "Drink this. Got a splash of whiskey in it, medicinal purposes." She accepted with shaking hands, the warmth of the cup almost painful against her frozen fingers. The liquid burned pleasantly down her throat, spreading heat through her chest. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can thank me by not dying in my cabin," Wade replied, though his tone held no harshness. "That'd be a mighty inconvenient thing for both of us." As warmth gradually returned to her body, Mabel became more aware of her rescuer. Wade Anderson stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscled build of a man accustomed to physical labor. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with deep lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. Dark hair touched with gray at the temples peeked out from beneath his hat, and his eyes were an unusual shade of green-gray like sage after rain. "You got a name?" he asked, stirring something in a pot over the stove. "Mabel Evans," she answered, deciding there was no point in lying. If he meant her harm, she was already at his mercy. "Well, Miss Evans, you're welcome to stay here tonight. Tomorrow, if the weather clears, I can take you into Riverside. It's the nearest town, about 15 miles southwest." She nodded, though panic fluttered in her chest at the thought. Towns meant people, people meant questions, and questions could lead those men right to her. Wade placed a bowl of stew in front of her, venison with potatoes and wild onions. Mabel hadn't realized how hungry she was until the aroma reached her. She ate slowly at first, then with increasing urgency. "Easy," Wade cautioned. "Your stomach won't thank you for rushing." When she'd finished eating, exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. Wade noticed her swaying in the chair and pointed to the bed. "You take it. I'll make do by the fire." "I couldn't possibly. You can and you will," he cut in firmly. "No offense, Miss Evans, but you look like you've been through hell already. A night on the floor won't kill me." Too tired to argue, Mabel allowed herself to be guided to the bed. The sheets smelled of pine and wood smoke. As soon as her head touched the pillow, consciousness began to slip away. "Why were you out there?" Wade's quiet question reached her through the fog of approaching sleep. "Running," she murmured, already half dreaming. "From what?" But Mabel was already asleep, the weight of her ordeal finally claiming her completely. Wade watched her for a moment, noting the bruise partially hidden by her hairline and the way her hands had curled protectively even in sleep. Whatever or whoever she was running from had scared her badly. He'd seen that look before in the eyes of soldiers after particularly brutal battles. He added wood to the fire, then spread his bedroll on the floor nearby. As he removed his boots, he glanced again at his unexpected guest. There would be questions to answer in the morning for both of them. Dawn arrived with clearing skies and bitter cold. Mabel woke disoriented, momentarily panicked at finding herself in an unfamiliar bed. The events of the previous day came back in a rush, and she sat up to find Wade already moving about the cabin, coffee brewing on the stove. "Morning," he said without turning. "Thought you might sleep the day away." Mabel pushed back the blankets, noticing someone had removed her outer clothing but left her undergarments intact. Her dress hung near the fire, now dry. "What time is it?" "Just past 7. Temperatures dropped something fierce overnight, but at least the snows stopped. Mabel retrieved her dress, ducking behind a blanket Wade tactfully hung as a makeshift screen. When she emerged, he handed her a cup of coffee and a plate with cornbread and what looked like preserved fruit. "It's not much, but it'll keep you going. You've already been more than kind," she said, meaning it. "I don't know how to thank you. You can start by telling me what had you running through the snow with nothing but that flimsy coat and a small bag." Mabel hesitated, staring into her coffee as if it might contain the right answers. "It's complicated. It usually is." Wade sat across from her, his expression neutral. "Look, I'm not one to pry into folks' business, but if someone's after you, I ought to know. This is my home." She recognized the fairness of his request. "I was working as a teacher in a small mining town near Helena. The mine owner's son took an interest in me." Her fingers tightened around the cup. "When I refused his advances, he didn't take it well. He cornered me after school one day." Wade's expression darkened, but he remained silent, waiting. "I fought back. In the struggle, he fell and hit his head on a desk. There was a lot of blood, and I panicked." Mabel's voice trembled slightly. "I grabbed what I could and ran. I don't even know if he's alive or dead." "And you've been running ever since," she nodded. 3 days. I think his father sent men after me. I heard gunshots the day before you found me." Wade considered this. "Hunters, most likely. Season's open for deer. If someone was tracking you specifically, they'd have been quieter about it." The thought provided little comfort. "His father owns half the county, including the sheriff. If Marcus is dead, they'll hang me for sure, regardless of the circumstances. And if he's not, then he'll never let me go. He said as much." Mabel set down her cup, hands shaking slightly. "I need to get further west. Oregon, maybe. Somewhere I can start fresh where nobody knows me." Wade was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Finally, he stood. "Finish your breakfast. We need to head into town for supplies before the next storm hits. I'll decide what to do about your situation after." "You're taking me to town?" Alarm colored her voice. "Riverside isn't Helena. Different county, different jurisdiction. Besides, you need proper winter clothes if you're planning to keep traveling this time of year. Otherwise, you'll just end up frozen beside another creek." The logic was undeniable, though fear still churned in Mabel's stomach. What if someone recognizes me in Riverside? Unlikely. It's mostly ranchers and a few prospectors passing through. "I doubt news from Helena mining towns travels that fast." Wade pulled on his heavy coat. "Besides, you'll be with me. That counts for something around these parts." An hour later, they were traveling down a snow-covered trail, Mabel seated behind Wade on his horse. The morning sun glinted off the fresh snow, creating a landscape of blinding beauty. Despite her circumstances, Mabel couldn't help but admire the majesty of the mountains rising in the distance. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "That it is," Wade agreed. "Dangerous, too, if you don't respect it." Montana winters don't forgive mistakes. "How long have you lived out here? Going on 8 years now. Came after the war, needed space and quiet." The way he said it told Mabel not to press further. She'd heard about the war between the states, how it had hollowed out men who'd seen too much death. She sensed Wade might be one of them, and before that, Virginia, family had a small horse farm. A pause. Not much left of it now. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the saddle and the horse's steady breathing. "What about you?" Wade finally asked. "You said you were a teacher, always wanted to be one, since I was a girl. My father was a professor before he died. I grew up surrounded by books." Mabel smiled at the memory. Mother thought it improper for a young lady to be so educated, but father encouraged it. And they're both gone now. "Yes, mother last spring. There was nothing left for me in Missouri after that." Wade nodded as if this made perfect sense to him. "So you came to Montana to teach minors' children their letters." "It seemed adventurous at the time," Mabel said with a rueful laugh. "I never imagined." "Life has a way of throwing unexpected trails in front of us," Wade observed. "The trick is learning to ride them as they come." Riverside appeared in the distance, a collection of wooden buildings nestled in a valley beside the river that gave it its name. Smoke rose from chimneys, and a few horses stood hitched outside what appeared to be a general store. "Small place," Wade explained, "but decent enough. Store, saloon, smithy, and a boarding house that serves meals. Most folks live on ranches scattered around." As they rode into town, Mabel pulled her scarf higher to partially cover her face. Several people called greetings to Wade, who responded with nods or brief words. He helped her dismount in front of the general store, tying his horse to the hitching post. "Morning, Wade," the storekeeper called as they entered. He was a round man with a bushy beard and friendly eyes. "Didn't expect to see you for another week or so." "Change of plans, Morris," Wade replied. "Need some extra supplies. Got a visitor." Morris's curious gaze fell on Mabel, who tried to appear smaller beneath his scrutiny. "This is Miss Evans," Wade said simply. "She's passing through." If Morris found anything unusual about a lone woman appearing with Wade Anderson, he didn't show it. "Welcome to Riverside, Miss Evans. What can I get for you folks today?" Wade handed over a list, then turned to Mabel. "Pick out a proper coat and boots, whatever else you need for traveling." When she began to protest, he added quietly, "You can repay me when you're settled somewhere safe." While Morris gathered their supplies, Mabel selected a sturdy wool coat, boots lined with sheepskin, and warm gloves. Wade added extra food supplies, ammunition, and a small medical kit to their purchases. As Morris tallied their bill, the door opened, letting in a blast of cold air and two men Mabel didn't recognize. Something in their manner, the way they surveyed the room with calculating eyes, sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the weather. Wade noticed her tension immediately. His hand moved subtly closer to the revolver at his hip as he positioned himself slightly in front of her. "Gentlemen," Morris greeted the newcomers. "What can I do for you today?" "Just passing through," the taller of the two replied, his gaze lingering on Mabel despite Wade's positioning. "Looking for information, actually. We're trying to locate a woman schoolteacher from up Helena Way. Might have come through here recently." Mabel's heart hammered so loudly she was certain everyone in the room could hear it. Her fingers clutched the edge of the counter, knuckles white with tension. "Haven't seen any strangers except these folks," Morris replied, gesturing to Wade and Mabel. "And Wade's been bringing his sister supplies since she's laid up with a baby coming. Ain't that right, Wade?" Without missing a beat, Wade nodded. "Marion's due any day now. Her husband's working the line for the railroad, so I'm helping out." The lie rolled off his tongue with such ease that even Mabel almost believed it. She kept her head down, grateful for the scarf that partially obscured her face. "This woman we're looking for," the second man said, pulling a paper from his pocket. "She's wanted for questioning in an attack on Marcus Prescott. His father's offering a substantial reward." He placed a crude drawing on the counter, a surprisingly accurate likeness of Mabel, though with her hair styled differently. The poster described her as dangerous and offered $500 for information leading to her capture. "Prescott," Morris whistled low. Heard he's got half the territory in his pocket. More than half, the first man confirmed with an unpleasant smile, and he wants this woman found. Bad business attacking the son of such an important man. Wade glanced at the poster with apparent disinterest. What'd she do to him? Hit him with a heavy object when he was courting her. Man still unconscious might not make it. Ungrateful, if you ask me. Prescott was offering her a better life than a schoolteacher could hope for. Mabel bit her tongue until she tasted blood, fighting to keep her expression neutral. Wade's face remained impassive, but she noticed the slight tightening of his jaw. Haven't seen anyone matching that description, Morris said, handing the poster back, but I'll keep an eye out. $500 is a lot of money. We'll be at the saloon until tomorrow if anyone remembers something useful, the taller man said, his gaze sweeping the store once more before they departed. A heavy silence fell after the door closed behind them. Morris looked between Wade and Mabel, his expression unreadable. Your sister having a baby, huh, Wade? He finally said, one eyebrow raised. Funny since I know for a fact you're an only child. Wade met his gaze steadily. Appreciate your discretion, Morris, the storekeeper sighed heavily. I don't want trouble in my town, Wade. Those men look like the type who bring it wherever they go. No trouble, Wade promised. We'll be on our way as soon as we're supplied. Morris finished tallying their purchases, then lowered his voice. Back door leads to the alley, might be better than parading past the saloon. Wade nodded his thanks, paid for their supplies, and guided Mabel toward the rear of the store. Once outside, he quickly led her through back alleys until they reached the livery stable. We need another horse, he told the stable master. Something sturdy but not flashy. Within minutes, Wade had purchased a solid bay mare and saddle. He loaded their supplies onto both horses, working with efficiency born of long practice. You didn't have to lie for me, Mabel said quietly as he tightened a saddle strap. Wasn't entirely a lie. Wade didn't look up from his task. I don't believe for a second that Prescott's son was innocently courting you when he got hurt. He wasn't, Mabel confirmed, her voice hardening at the memory. He tried to force himself on me, said no one would believe a penniless schoolteacher over the son of Theodore Prescott. Wade straightened, meeting her eyes directly for the first time since the men had entered the store. I believe you, 3 simple words, yet they nearly undid her. After days of fear and flight, having someone, especially this taciturn cowboy who owed her nothing, declare his faith in her version of events brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Those men will check every establishment in town, Wade continued, practical again. We need to leave now, but not by the main road. Where are we going? My place first to gather what I need, then west. At her questioning look, he added, I know these mountains better than most. There's a pass that leads to Idaho territory. Prescott's influence doesn't reach that far. You're coming with me. Mabel couldn't hide her surprise. Why would you risk yourself for a stranger? Wade secured the last of their supplies before answering. I've seen what powerful men do when they believe they're above the law, and I've regretted times I stood by and did nothing. He handed her the reins to the bay mare. Besides, you wouldn't last 2 days in these mountains on your own, no matter how good your new coat is. They left Riverside by a game trail that followed the river, avoiding the main road entirely. The temperature continued to drop as afternoon faded toward evening, and dark clouds gathering in the west promised more snow by nightfall. Storms coming in faster than I expected, Wade observed, studying the sky. We need to push hard to reach the cabin before it hits. They rode at a brisk pace, the horses' hooves crunching through snow and ice. Mabel, though not an experienced rider, managed to keep up, driven by the knowledge that Prescott's men were so close behind. Dusk was falling when they finally reached Wade's cabin. Working together, they quickly stabled and fed the horses, then carried their supplies inside. Pack only what you need for survival, Wade instructed as he pulled a worn leather satchel from beneath his bed. Extra ammunition, food that won't spoil, 1 change of clothes. Weight matters in the mountains. Mabel watched as he efficiently sorted through his belongings, taking only essentials. From a loose floorboard beneath the table, he retrieved a small box that clinked with the unmistakable sound of coins. You've prepared for this, she observed. Having to leave quickly, Wade paused briefly in his packing. After the war, I learned that security is often an illusion, best to be ready to move at a moment's notice. What did you do? Before, I mean, raised horses like my father, then scouted for the Union Army. His expression closed slightly. After that, whatever kept food on the table until I found this place. The unspoken parts of his history hung between them, but Mabel didn't press. Everyone had pieces of themselves they preferred to keep private. She understood that better than most. They worked in companionable silence, preparing for the journey ahead. When Wade stepped outside to check the weather, Mabel found herself studying the cabin that had been his home for 8 years. Despite its simplicity, it held touches of care: shelves built with precision, a carefully mended chair, books stacked neatly beside the bed. Walking away from this sanctuary couldn't be easy for him. The door opened, bringing a gust of icy air and Wade's imposing figure. "Storm's almost on us. We'll leave at first light." "I'm sorry," Mabel said suddenly, "for bringing this trouble to your doorstep, for making you leave your home." Wade shook off snow from his coat before hanging it by the door. "Been thinking it might be time for a change anyway." Getting too comfortable isn't good for a man. He didn't sound entirely convinced of his own words, but Mabel appreciated the attempt to ease her guilt. "If those men track us here, they won't," Wade interrupted confidently. "Not tonight, at least. That storm will cover our tracks and keep them in town until it passes. By then, we'll be halfway to the Idaho border." He stoked the fire higher, then began preparing a simple meal of beans, dried venison, and the last of his coffee. As they ate, Mabel found herself studying her unlikely protector, wondering what had shaped him into a man willing to abandon everything for a stranger's sake. "You should get some sleep," Wade advised when they'd finished eating. "Tomorrow will be hard riding. What about you?" "I'll keep watch for a while." Mabel wanted to argue that he needed rest too, but the determined set of his jaw told her it would be pointless. Instead, she moved to the bed, pulling the blankets around herself as the wind began to howl outside, rattling the cabin's sturdy walls. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive. Her mind raced with images of Marcus Prescott's angry face, his father's men searching for her, and the uncertain journey ahead. After an hour of restless turning, she sat up to find Wade still awake, cleaning his rifle by the fire's light. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking up. "Too many thoughts." Wade nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Happens that way sometimes. Mind gets to racing and won't settle down. Do you ever regret it, coming out here living alone?" His hand stilled on the rifle. "Sometimes. Winter nights mostly, when the silence gets too loud." He resumed his methodical cleaning. "But then spring comes, and I remember why I chose this life." "What happens after Idaho?" Mabel asked, voicing the question that had been troubling her most. "To you, I mean." "Haven't thought that far ahead." Wade reassembled his rifle with practiced ease. "Might keep going to Oregon. Heard they need good horses out there." "Because of me, you've lost everything." Wade finally looked up, his expression softening slightly in the firelight. "Not everything, Miss Evans." "Not by a long shot." Something in his gaze made her heart quicken. For a moment, the cabin seemed smaller, the space between them charged with an awareness that hadn't been there before. The moment broke when a particularly fierce gust of wind slammed against the cabin, making the timbers creak in protest. "Try to sleep," Wade said, his voice a touch gruffer than before. "Storm's getting worse." Mabel nodded, lying back down and pulling the blankets tight around her. This time, exhaustion won over anxiety, and she drifted into a dreamless sleep. She woke to the smell of coffee and the soft gray light of pre-dawn filtering through the cabin's single window. Wade was already dressed, 2 packs ready by the door. "Storm passed faster than I expected," he reported. "We should move while the weather holds." They ate a quick breakfast, then dressed in their warmest clothing. Mabel pulled on her new coat and boots, grateful for their solid warmth against the biting cold outside. The world beyond the cabin door had been transformed into a crystalline landscape of white. 6 inches of fresh snow blanketed everything, and the rising sun cast a rosy glow across the unmarked expanse. "Beautiful," Mabel breathed, momentarily forgetting their urgent need to depart. "And dangerous," Wade reminded her, though his own expression suggested he wasn't immune to the scene's beauty. "Fresh snow means we'll leave clear tracks." They worked quickly to prepare the horses, loading their packs and ensuring everything was secure. As Wade helped Mabel mount her mare, their hands touched briefly, sending an unexpected warmth through her despite the freezing temperature. "Stay close behind me," Wade instructed as he swung into his own saddle. "The path gets tricky in places, and the snow will hide some of the dangers." They set off westward, following a barely visible trail that wound through dense pine forest. The horses moved carefully through the deep snow, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Despite the cold and the circumstances, Mabel found herself appreciating the pristine beauty of the Montana wilderness, the towering trees laden with snow, the occasional flash of movement as wildlife scattered at their approach. They had been riding for perhaps 2 hours when Wade suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. He sat motionless in his saddle, head tilted slightly as if listening. "What is it?" Mabel whispered, instantly alert to potential danger. Instead of answering, Wade dismounted and moved to a nearby ridge, dropping to one knee as he surveyed the path behind them. When he returned to the horses, his expression was grim. "Riders, 3 of them following our trail." Fear clutched at Mabel's heart. Prescott's men, most likely. They must have left town during the night, despite the storm. Wade checked his rifle, then remounted quickly. "We need to move faster." They urged their horses to a trot where the terrain allowed, Wade constantly scanning for routes that might help conceal their passage. By midday, dark clouds had gathered again, and the temperature dropped noticeably. "Another storm," Wade observed. "Might work in our favor this time." They stopped briefly to rest the horses and eat a cold meal of jerky and hardtack. Mabel's muscles ached from the unaccustomed hours in the saddle, but she made no complaint. Every mile increased their distance from Prescott's men and their chances of escape. "The pass is about 4 hours ahead," Wade explained as they prepared to continue. "Once we're through, we'll be in Idaho territory. There's a small settlement on the other side where we can rest properly. And then, one step at a time, Miss Evans." As they rode, the first snowflakes began to fall gently at first, then with increasing intensity as the wind picked up. Visibility decreased rapidly, the world around them reduced to swirling white punctuated by the dark shapes of trees. "Stay close," Wade called over the rising wind. "Easy to get separated in this," the horses struggled against the deepening snow and buffeting wind. Mabel's face burned with cold despite her scarf, and her hands had gone numb around the reins. Just as she began to wonder how much longer she could endure, Wade gestured toward a dark shape ahead, a small cave set into a rocky hillside. "We'll shelter there until the worst passes," he shouted over the storm's howl. The cave proved just deep enough for them and the horses. Wade quickly built a small, smokeless fire using dead wood he found inside, creating a circle of warmth in the stone enclosure. "What about Prescott's men?" Mabel asked, huddling near the flames as sensation painfully returned to her extremities. "If they have any sense, they've found shelter too. No one travels in a blizzard like this unless they're desperate or foolish." They shared the last of Wade's coffee, warming their hands on the metal cups. Outside, the storm raged with undiminished fury, snow piling up at the cave's entrance. "Will this delay cause problems? Reaching the pass, I mean?" Wade considered her question. "Adds risk, certainly. Pass can be treacherous even in good weather, but pushing on in this would be suicide." Mabel nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Every delay increased the chance of Prescott's men catching up to them. "You're worried," Wade observed, his perceptiveness catching her off guard. "Terrified would be more accurate." Mabel attempted a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I keep thinking about what happens if they catch us, what they might do to you for helping me. I can handle myself. That's not." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "You've risked everything for me, a complete stranger. I don't understand why." Wade was quiet for so long that Mabel thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost lost beneath the storm's noise. "After the war, I drifted for a while, ended up working as a hired gun for a cattle baron in Wyoming, man named Hollister." His expression darkened with the memory. "He was having a dispute with smaller ranchers over water rights, hired me and others to persuade them to cooperate." Mabel remained silent, sensing the importance of whatever he was about to reveal. "There was a woman, a widow, trying to hold onto her small ranch. Hollister wanted her land particularly, said the water source on it was essential." Wade stared into the fire, seeing ghosts of the past. We were sent to frighten her into selling. Things got out of hand. The others, they burned her barn with livestock inside. When she came out with a shotgun to stop them, one of Hollister's men shot her. Horror filled Mabel at the tail. And you, I didn't stop it, stood by and watched it happen. The self-loathing in his voice was unmistakable. She didn't die, but she lost everything. Her land, her livelihood. That wasn't your doing. My inaction made me equally guilty. Wade's gaze finally lifted to meet hers. I've spent 8 years trying to atone for the things I did and didn't do during that time. When I found you by that creek, half frozen and clearly running from something, I saw a chance to make a different choice. The raw honesty in his confession touched Mabel deeply. She reached across the small space between them, placing her hand over his. Thank you for telling me that. And for making a different choice this time. Something shifted in Wade's expression, a softening around his eyes, a slight relaxation of the tension he carried in his shoulders. His hand turned beneath hers, fingers intertwining with surprising gentleness from such a weathered man. They sat like that as the storm continued outside, connected by touch and shared confidences. In that moment, Mabel realized that despite knowing him for only 2 days, she trusted Wade Anderson more completely than she had trusted anyone since her father died. The storm abated shortly before dawn, leaving a transformed landscape of deep drifts and ice-coated trees. They set out as soon as there was enough light to see, aware that Prescott's men would be on the move as well. The going was difficult, the horses struggling through snow that sometimes reached their chests. Wade led them along ridgelines where possible, where the wind had swept the snow into lesser depths. By midday, the mountains loomed closer, and the pass Wade had spoken of came into view, a narrow gap between towering peaks, its entrance partially obscured by fallen rock and snow. We'll need to lead the horses through some sections, Wade explained as they approached. Too dangerous to ride in the narrower parts. They dismounted at the pass entrance, Wade going ahead to check the route while Mabel held the horses. He returned looking concerned. Recent avalanche has changed the path. It's still passable, but we'll need to be extremely careful. They proceeded slowly, Wade testing each section before allowing Mabel and the horses to follow. The pass narrowed steadily, hemmed in by sheer rock faces on both sides. In places, the path was barely wide enough for the horses to walk single file, with treacherous drops visible on one side. Almost halfway, Wade encouraged as they paused to rest. The worst part is just ahead, then it widens again. As they prepared to continue, a sound echoed through the pass, the unmistakable crack of a rifle shot, followed by the whine of a bullet ricocheting off nearby rock. Get down. Wade shouted, pulling Mabel behind a large boulder as another shot rang out. How did they find us so quickly? Mabel gasped, heart pounding. Must have picked up our trail after the storm passed. Wade cautiously peered around the boulder. I count 3 of them at the pass entrance. They have the advantage of position. What do we do? Wade checked his rifle and revolver. I'll hold them here. You take the horses and continue through the pass. There's a trading post about 5 miles on the other side. Wait for me there. I'm not leaving you. This isn't a debate, Mabel. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the urgency in his voice silenced her objection. I can move faster and quieter alone. I'll lead them away, then circle back. Before she could argue further, Wade pressed his map into her hands. Follow this exactly. The trail is marked. Promise me you'll go now. The determination in his eyes told Mabel that arguing would be pointless. I promise, but you have to promise to follow. I will. His hand briefly touched her cheek in a gesture so tender it took her breath away. Now go while I give you cover. Wade moved to a position where he could fire down the pass, deliberately revealing himself long enough to draw attention. As Prescott's men concentrated their fire on his location, Mabel led the horses further into the pass, fighting tears and the overwhelming urge to look back. The next hour was the longest of her life. Each step away from Wade felt like a betrayal, though she knew following his plan offered their best chance. The pass gradually widened as promised, eventually opening onto a downward slope that led toward distant forested foothills, Idaho territory. She had made it across the border, but the achievement felt hollow without Wade beside her. Following the map, Mabel located the trail that would lead to the trading post. As she descended into the relative shelter of the trees, the gunfire from the pass finally ceased. The sudden silence was somehow more terrifying than the shots had been. It meant either Wade or his pursuers had prevailed. The trading post appeared as the afternoon light began to fade, a sturdy log structure with smoke rising from its chimney. An older man with a silver beard emerged as Mabel approached, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern as he noted her disheveled state and the absence of any traveling companion. "You all right, miss?" he called, moving to help her dismount. "Looks like you've had a rough journey." "I'm waiting for someone," Mabel explained, her voice strained with worry. "He should be coming along the same trail." The man, who introduced himself as Henry Bartlett, the post's proprietor, led her inside, where a fire burned welcomingly in a stone hearth. His wife, Martha, immediately set about providing hot tea and stew, clucking sympathetically over Mabel's obvious exhaustion. "Been running this post for 15 years, Henry told her as she ate. "Seen all sorts come through that pass, some running to something, most running from something. Don't much matter which to us." Mabel appreciated his tacit offer of discretion. As darkness fell with no sign of Wade, her anxiety grew increasingly difficult to hide. "Your friend knows these mountains?" Henry asked as he lit lamps around the trading post's main room. "Yes, very well, I think." "Then give him time. Man who knows the terrain has 100 ways to outsmart those who don't." Martha provided Mabel with clean clothes and a small room off the main building to rest. Though exhaustion pulled at her, sleep remained elusive as she listened for any sound that might indicate Wade's arrival. Near midnight, the sound of approaching hoofbeats finally broke the silence. Mabel rushed from her room to find Henry already at the door, rifle ready as a precaution. When he lowered the weapon with a relieved nod, Mabel knew who had arrived. Wade entered the trading post, snow-covered and weary but wonderfully, miraculously alive. A bloody gash across his left forearm was his only apparent injury. "Told you I'd follow," he said simply when he saw her. Mabel didn't remember crossing the room, only the feeling of his arms closing around her as she pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the now familiar scent of leather and pine, reassuring herself that he was truly there. "Prescott's men?" she asked when she could finally speak. "One dead. One injured badly enough that the third had to take him back." Wade's expression showed no pleasure in this outcome, only grim necessity. "They won't be following us any further." Henry and Martha tactfully busied themselves elsewhere, as Wade told Mabel the details of his escape, how he'd led the pursuers on a false trail, before doubling back through a hidden ravine he'd discovered years earlier. "We should be safe now," he concluded, wincing slightly as Martha returned to clean and bandage his arm. "Prescott's influence doesn't extend this far west, and these good people don't seem inclined to turn us in." "You'd be right about that," Henry confirmed. "The law and I have an understanding. I don't bother them. They don't bother me." They stayed at the trading post for 3 days, recovering from their journey and planning their next move. On the evening of the third day, Wade found Mabel sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "Henry received news from a traveler today," he said, settling beside her on the bench. "Seems Marcus Prescott regained consciousness. He'll recover fully." Relief flooded through Mabel. Whatever else Marcus Prescott might be, she hadn't wanted his death on her conscience. "Does that change anything?" she asked. "Will they still come after me?" "Hard to say. Prescott's pride might demand it, even if the charges wouldn't stick now that his son will recover." Wade studied the distant horizon thoughtfully. "Better to keep moving west, I think. Put more distance between us and Montana." Us. The simple word carried more meaning than Mabel had expected. "You're still planning to come with me?" Wade turned to face her directly, his normally guarded expression open and vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "If you'll have me, these past days have shown me something I didn't expect to find." "What's that?" "A future I might want to be part of." His hand found hers, rough calluses gentle against her skin. "I've been alone a long time, Mabel. Thought that was all there was left for me, but finding you by that creek, it changed something." Mabel's heart quickened at his words and the earnest emotion behind them. "I felt it too. Even half frozen and terrified, I knew you were someone I could trust." She smiled, remembering. You said I'd warm beside your fire that night. I didn't realize how much more warmth I'd find. Wade's smile, a rare, transformative expression that softened the hard lines of his face, made her breath catch. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward until his lips met hers in a kiss that held both question and promise. When they separated, the certainty Mabel saw in his eyes matched the feeling growing in her own heart. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Oregon then? Wade asked, his arm settling comfortably around her shoulders. Oregon, she agreed, leaning into his warmth as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. 6 months later, the small homestead took shape under their combined efforts, a sturdy cabin nestled in a valley with mountains rising in the distance. A corral for the horses Wade had begun to raise, and fields where Mabel planned to establish a garden come spring. The local settlement, little more than a cluster of homes, a general store and a one-room schoolhouse had welcomed them without excessive questions about their past. Mabel found purpose teaching the community's children, while Wade's knowledge of horses quickly earned him respect among the local ranchers. No word had reached them of Theodore Prescott or his men. Whether he had abandoned the pursuit or simply hadn't yet discovered their location remained unknown, but with each passing week, the shadow of fear receded further. On a crisp autumn evening, Wade returned from the settlement with supplies and news he'd secured a contract to provide horses for the stage line that connected their remote community to larger towns further west. "It's not much yet," he said as they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset that still reminded Mabel of that evening at the trading post. "But it's a start, enough to build on." "It's more than enough," Mabel replied, her hand finding his in a gesture that had become natural between them. "It's everything I never dared hope for when I was running." Wade's arm tightened around her shoulders. "No more running, this is home now." As darkness fell across their small piece of Oregon, Mabel thought about the journey that had brought them here from a freezing creek in Montana to this peaceful valley, where they had begun to build a life together. The path had been dangerous and unexpected, but she wouldn't change a single step of it. "I love you, Wade Anderson," she said softly, the words coming easily now, though they had once seemed impossible to speak. His answer came in the form of a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future warm, certain, and as enduring as the mountains that had both separated and ultimately united them.